Chapter 28. Judgment. The past 2 weeks have been absolute hell. Tortures of every kind have come one after another. Today is the day of our trial. Finally, a day of respite. The room, despite being the size of a stadium, is packed. Journalists, spectators, defenders, and above all, accusers have all taken their seats. On the left, 2 glassed-in booths await the defendants. At the back, a large area is reserved for the judge and his associates. In the middle of this legal stadium, a trapdoor opens, and the true master of ceremonies appears, greeted by the crowd, which begins to chant his name with excitement. Seïndi, the most media-savvy host on Epoxia, addresses his audience. "Credit to you," Zeno says, pointing dramatically toward the defendants' booths. "What fate do we reserve for traitors, dear friends?" He waits a few seconds before continuing in a sharp tone. "Death." The crowd stirs, screams, approves, obedient to the orders of the cheerleaders and carefully following the instructions that appear on the holographic screens. Long convulsive shivers shake this compact mass with each new command, and deafening clamor resounds. Only one person, seated high in the bleachers at the end of the last row, remains still. While their cold face betrays no emotion, their eyes, on the other hand, are full of intense hatred and cold determination, reflecting the resentment within them. Suddenly, 30 jurors enter to the cheers of the public and calmly take their reserved seats across from the judge's podium after shaking hands with Seïndi. All were chosen from among the most prominent figures of Epoxia, artists, politicians, and jet-set regulars, standing tall and offering the crowd their fake, vain smiles. Suddenly, Zeno points to a large door and exclaims, "Here come the traitors, dear friends. Give them the ovation they deserve." He bursts into maniacal laughter as Clara and Nathan appear, tightly bound to levitating chairs that deposit them each into a booth under the crowd's boos. 2 armed soldiers stand behind them. The defendants look drawn, their gazes fixed and vacant. Their emaciated, pallid faces reveal no emotion. The crowd goes wild. Some spectators throw objects that disintegrate upon hitting the antimatter wall. Nothing must disrupt the show. Now the judge and his assistants take their seats on the podium. "Let the judgment begin," Zeno yells, raising his arm in an emphatic gesture. Then, with cruel delight, he announces, "First, the facts." Suddenly, darkness engulfs the stadium. 2 enormous tubes descend from the ceiling, revealing a giant screen. A deep silence falls over the audience. Images appear. A film recounts the crimes and betrayals of Clara and Nathan. It's a series of fabrications meant to convince the jurors of the Seïndi couple's guilt. After the film, the defense attorney, whose role is purely symbolic, approaches the defendants and asks, "Do you have anything to add?" "We're listening." The technical crew springs into action. In the backstage area, close to the set, a control center is set up. 2 actors, dressed in special suits, sit behind a one-way mirror. They are invisible to the public and control the defendants' reactions. Every movement they make is immediately mimicked by Nathan and Clara. Next to them, doctors monitor the defendants, ensuring that the substances injected into them keep them in a state of complete mental dependence. Sitting motionless, dressed like grotesque puppets, they obediently reproduce the gestures and expressions dictated by the 2 actors. Nathan is despondent. In his tired mind, a relentless stream of dark thoughts flows. His reflections consume him, jostle him, exhaust him. He is powerless against this carnival, this degrading spectacle. However, he retains a semblance of mental autonomy. "I'm just a toy. What's happening? This doesn't feel like a dream. I can hear them making me say anything. It's real torture. If only I had my cybernetic body. I never thought I'd regret becoming a man again." Suddenly, he utters a sentence so unthinkable it wounds him to his soul. I acknowledge that if they hadn't come for us and treated us, my wife and I would have died shortly after landing. The radiation we absorbed in Africa was too massive. I affirm today that Africa is indeed a devastated and highly radioactive land where all life is now inconceivable. I admit I lied. I repent. We were wrong to question the statements made by the leaders of Epoxia. Nathan closes his eyes. I need to stay silent. This is worse than anything. I'm a spectator of myself. He suddenly hears Clara's voice, passionately spewing lies. All her anger and despair are useless. He is powerless against the powerful device that controls his entire being. After 2 hours of predictable debates and rigged interrogations, interspersed with commercials and twists carefully orchestrated by Zeno, the show nears its end. The host declares in a solemn voice, "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, please retire to deliberate." He flashes a wicked smile and continues. In the meantime, I ask you, dear audience, to give a big hand to your favorite DJ, the one and only, Scotto Rio. On stage, an opening appears. A transparent sphere emerges and rises into the air. It contains a man with grayish skin, looking more like a mummy or a zombie than a healthy human. It's hard to tell his age. He sits on a mechanical throne, connected to it by a series of cables literally plunging into him. It's a primitive neural connection, from a generation far older than what Nathan and his compatriots use today. Yet, this equipment gave Scotto Rio a second wind of fame, his thirst for celebrity leading him to undergo these implants to merge with the machine and create the sounds that compose his music more freely and easily. Meanwhile, in the deliberation room, a heavy silence prevails. The jurors, motionless, await the words of the man seated at the end of the table, above whom floats a hologram displaying his name and position as a member of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. He finally speaks. Ladies and gentlemen, let me summarize the verdict to be delivered. On the charge of terrorism, theft, and assault resulting in death, you must answer, guilty. On the charge of fleeing to foreign soil and risking contamination of others, you must answer, guilty. Mr. Korlovsky, as juror number 1, you will have the honor of presenting the results of this deliberation. Do you agree? He puts a sinister tone into the question that would discourage anyone from refusing the proposal. The jurors cast fearful glances at the armed men surrounding them, as well as at certain civilians standing behind them, cold, silent sentinels. No dissent will be tolerated. A deathly silence falls over them. In the stadium, the atmosphere is entirely different. Zeno has started singing in the rain and offers the audience a frenzied dance. His feet, tapping rhythmically on the ground, splash blood from dead animals all around him, much to the delight of the excited crowd. The jurors have returned to their places on stage. Zeno soon interrupts his performance and turns to the defendant's booth, proclaiming, "It's time. Time to decide your fate." Then he gestures grandly toward the audience and yells, "What shall we do with these scoundrels?" The audience chants wildly, "Death! Death!" Zeno lets out a crude, disgusting laugh and continues, "Let's ask the first juror to give us the answer." He waves his hand to invite Korlovsky to speak. The latter straightens up and displays a radiant smile, in stark contrast to the anxious expression he had in the deliberation room. The verdict is delivered, merciless and in line with the expectations of all, both the manipulative government and the manipulated public. Guilty. A huge roar rises from the bleachers. The collective energy lifts the crowd like a violent shiver would shake the spine of a giant beast. The judge calls for silence, allowing the crowd to express their joy for a moment before turning to the condemned and solemnly declaring, "Based on the judgment's conclusions regarding the charges against you, I order your immediate imprisonment until the time of your execution." He pauses, giving the audience a conspiratorial wink, and reignites the show by announcing, The execution will take place in a month and will be broadcast live, my friends. Once again, cries of joy and laughter erupt and echo in the immense hall. A murderous madness has taken hold of the audience, and there's no doubt they would lynch the condemned without hesitation if given the chance. In the booths, the defendants respond to this mockery of justice with carefully orchestrated theatrical gestures, movements of dismay accompanied by horrified, repentant looks. Backstage, on one of the security service screens, an alarm goes off. Individual movement anomaly. Lieutenant, barks one of the officers. The lieutenant approaches and asks. Yes? The soldier replies. An anomaly is reported in Sector D26. The lieutenant requests a close-up. The image zooms in on the man in the last row, who once again refused to adopt the same behavior as his neighbors. The readings confirm that since the start of the legal show, he hasn't shown the slightest sign of satisfaction. The officer immediately contacts the security cordon in the room and gives his orders. Suspect in Sector D26. I'm sending you the image. Please intercept this man when the crowd exits. Over. Zeno has concluded his show. The condemned have been returned to their cells, and the dimming lights indicate that the broadcast is over. The crowd files out of the bleachers, many humming the evening's theme song or sharing their enthusiasm with their neighbors. In the stadium's entryway, the suspect walks calmly, trying not to draw attention. Yet he feels 1,000 eyes on him. There's something in the air, a tension too intense not to arouse suspicion. He quickens his pace as much as he dares without running. He curses his cowardice, his fear of raising alarms that might be triggered by breaking the rhythm of the controlled and overly strict security. Behind him, 2 guards follow him step by step, weapons ready to fire. He finally reaches an exit and rushes down the steps, almost stumbling. His heart pounds in his chest, and he feels the sweat break out on his face. The man feels trapped, and fear squeezes his throat. His legs, heavy and weak, slow him down. He doesn't dare to turn around, afraid he'll see the guards getting closer and closer. Suddenly, a shout echoes through the air. Hey, you! Stop right there! The man freezes, feeling a cold sweat down his spine. Time seems to stand still, his heart racing. He hears footsteps approaching, the guards closing in on him. He swallows, his mouth dry, realizing he has no choice but to surrender. He raises his hands and turns around slowly. The guards, their faces hidden under helmets, surround him, weapons raised. Come with us, no funny business. The soldier tightened his grip with his cybernetic hand, and the security cordon closed in around the intruder. The stranger smiled, placed his hand on his abdomen, and suddenly created a violent gust of wind around him that swiftly grew as powerful as a tornado. The soldiers were violently thrown backward as if they had been blown away by an explosion. The one holding the stranger by the shoulder was also flung several yards away, screaming as he looked at his arm, severed at the elbow. The painkillers in his artificial body were released, quickly easing his pain. The wound was cauterized, with the sensors indicating a temperature of 572 degrees Fahrenheit. Dazed, the soldiers got back on their feet, only to realize with dismay that the suspect was no longer there. Chap received a message as he walked down the hallway leading Clara and Nathan to their cell. Commander. There's been an incident at Gate 12. What happened? We don't know yet, but everything was recorded. You should come to the control room. Chap rushed to the control room and reviewed the footage. Replay the sequence slowed down 1,000 times and zoom in on that guy. A few moments later, he rubbed his chin, eyes wide in disbelief. Despite the slow motion, the man's movements were nearly imperceptible, his speed and attack agility beyond comprehension. Chap then exclaimed, "Gabriel.